Welcome to Behavior Guidance, Part 2.1. We've already covered the first part of our outline, which is what is behavior guidance. Now we're going to review why do children misbehave before finishing up with how do we promote functional behaviors. So why do children misbehave? In order to have this discussion, we need to distinguish between misbehavior and appropriate behavior. Other terms for this are functional versus dysfunctional behavior. Dysfunctional or misbehavior is inappropriate or self-destructive behavior that does not serve any positive nor productive function in the child's life. It's important to note that sometimes children misbehave not intentionally to get some type of negative reaction. Instead, they are truly hoping and believing that they are going to get a positive reaction, but instead the environment determines that their behavior was dysfunctional instead. When we say that behavior is inappropriate, we also need to acknowledge that what is appropriate or inappropriate varies from culture to culture. And it is part of our job to help children learn the difference between what is appropriate at school and what is inappropriate at school. And that might be different from what they are allowed to do, what is deemed appropriate or inappropriate in their home environments. Functional behavior is therefore going to be appropriate actions or behavior. Again, what is appropriate will be deemed by the individual society or culture. This appropriate action or behavior serves some type of productive or positive function in the child's overall activities and or their patterns of interactions with others. So, if we have dysfunctional or misbehavior that we are seeing in our after-school programs, why are we seeing it and what can we do about it? Well, there are two different types of misbehavior that we need to distinguish between: adult versus child-centered. Adult-centered definitions of misbehavior focus on the effect that a child's behavior has on the adult. Let me say that again. Adult-centered definitions, when someone says that the misbehavior is a misbehavior because of the effect, the outcome, the product, the feeling that it makes the adult have, it is considered adult-centered. It may not be a misbehavior from one adult to another adult. That's how you know that it is adult-centered as opposed to child-centered. Adult-centered misbehavior is driven by our own personal bias and how we might be feeling in a given moment. So the individual actions of the child are evaluating according to the seriousness of how it makes the adult feel. Does the adult strongly care about this particular subject, this particular object? Maybe the other child who might have been harmed by this particular child's misbehavior according to this adult's standards. Or maybe the adult is just hungry. Maybe the adult is having a bad day. Maybe the adult has had to deal with several children's misbehavior and now this is just the one that flips their lid. They can no longer deal with it, and therefore it is a misbehavior that normally they would not have categorized as a misbehavior. When we encounter children who are quote-unquote misbehaving, our first step is to stop and reflect to determine if the behavior is misbehavior based on our adult-centered definitions, or if it truly is a child-centered definition of misbehavior. When the misbehavior is child-centered, that means that we are focusing on defining the behavior based on the child's ability level. How old are they? What are they capable of doing or incapable of doing? What are their motives? Was the behavior intentional or unintentional? And then what are going to be the long-term well-being effects of the child based on how I evaluate it? If it is truly a misbehavior, I need to make sure that I handle it appropriately so that we have positive long-term outcomes from this misbehavior, that the child learns something from it and hopefully doesn't do it again. Or if they do it again, they are quick to realize and take responsibility for their actions. However, if it is not truly a misbehavior and it's an error or a misunderstanding in their ability level, then we again need to make sure to appropriately address that so that we have positive long-term outcomes as opposed to negative ones for us poorly handling a situation. So, misbehavior or dysfunctional behavior. We don't want to be seeing that in our program. The first step when we see a misbehavior is to determine if it is adult-centered, in which case it probably truly is not a misbehavior. It's just something that is annoying us as the adult in that moment, which happens, it's fine, we're humans. But if it is child-centered by definition in their misbehavior, why are they misbehaving? And then what can we do about it? There are 8 underlying causes as to why children misbehave. When we know why a child is misbehaving, that's the first step in us figuring out how to address it. Children sometimes misbehave simply because they are bursting with energy and joy. This can be known as gleeful abandon, group contagion, or immature self-control. Sometimes kids have a field trip that they're going on or that they just got back from. It's their birthday, it's Friday, and they're looking forward to the weekend. It's a project that they are just so excited about doing. And because they are so excited, they misbehave. They are talking to their friends, they're whispering and they're saying things like, oh yeah, I just can't wait to do this. Or, oh my gosh, I've been looking forward to this all year. Or they're just so giggly, they can't stop laughing about every little thing. Then we have this idea of group contagion, that one child is just filled with energy and now the other child thinks that's funny and is doing it too, and now your whole class is giggly. And it is misbehavior because it is causing a disruption to the classroom environment. However, this type of misbehavior isn't necessarily intentional. The child isn't necessarily doing it on purpose. They're just truly excited and they're happy. So we again have to think about the long-term consequences of how we're going to respond to this type of misbehavior. Children also misbehave because they simply do not understand what we expect of them. They have misunderstood our expectations. Sometimes it's because we have given them more than they can handle. That's going to be another reason that children misbehave. They cannot do what we are asking them to do. We have inappropriate expectations. When children do not understand or truly cannot do what we are asking them to do, their misbehavior, again, is probably not intentional. It's probably not on purpose. And we as the adult need to stop and reflect on how did we explain something? Did we maybe give them too many steps at once? Did we give them too much time in between the directions and the actual carrying out of the directions? Are we asking them to use scissors when they developmentally don't have the fine motor skills to do it yet? Are we asking them to take turns or work in groups and read directions that are far above their reading ability levels? We have to stop and think about those things as to what we might be doing that's creating this misbehavior that probably is not intentional on behalf of the child. Children also misbehave when they're bored, when they're tired, when they're miserable. When they're bored, again, this misbehavior isn't necessarily on purpose. Sometimes they really are just staring off. They doze off if they're tired. They start twiddling their thumb or their pencil and then they accidentally drop it and it causes this disruption. Sometimes feeling bored, tired, or miserable causes misbehavior that is also not intentional. Sometimes though it is intentional because they're so bored, they want us to move on from what we're doing. They want to cause some excitement and therefore they misbehave. So it's important when we realize that misbehavior is coming from boredom in particular, that we figure out if the behavior they engaged in because of boredom was then intentional or unintentional. Are they trying to now cause up a problem, or was it really just that they were zoning out and weren't trying to cause the problem, but they were just so bored they didn't really realize what they were doing because they went off into a whole different world? Also, when children are tired or just uncomfortable, miserable, they're going to be more snappy. We as adults are the same way. So we have to remember that it might not be how they're truly meaning to react, but because they have immature self-control, going back to that first point, when they're really excited, sometimes they just can't control it because they quite literally don't have the brain development to be able to do so. We have to take that into consideration with how we are going to respond to this misbehavior. Children also misbehave because they are desperate for attention. They desire recognition. Many of the children who come to our programs do not necessarily have a supportive home life. Now, some do. Some have parents who want to be supportive but lack the resources. Some have parents who are completely capable of being supportive, but the majority of them do not. The majority of them have parents who simply do not have the time, a resource of time, to be able to be supportive and to give attention. Some lack the knowledge, the education background to be able to be supportive for their children. So when they come to us, they're interacting with an adult who does want to give them attention, who does want to give them their time, or we wouldn't be doing this job, we would be doing a different job. And they're desperate to have that attention. They're desperate to get those needs met from us. Again, this can be intentional or unintentional. They may be seeking attention and not even realizing that they're doing it, but some children do very much realize they're doing it, so it's our job to also decipher whether or not it was intentional or unintentional, and therefore how to respond. Children will also misbehave when they're overwhelmed by frustration or any given situation. We as adults are the same way. We might have a lot going on at home, and although professionally it is our job to keep that at home, sometimes it'll trickle over into how patient we are or are not with the children in our care. Children will be the same way. If they have someone who's continually bothering them, or they're just feeling like they have so many demands being placed on them between the teacher and the noon duties and their after school group and their parents, what's going on, they can become very overwhelmed and therefore misbehave and act out in certain different ways. Children will also potentially misbehave simply because they're angry or they're resentful. They will rebel. And this can be towards an adult, or it can also be towards their peer group that they will be angry towards or resentful towards. And the way that they misbehave might be physical, it might just be emotional, but the reason they're misbehaving is because of anger, not knowing how to handle that anger, how to express that anger in a more healthy and appropriate way. The last underlying reason that children misbehave is because sometimes they just feel totally hopeless or helpless. They have this overall feeling of discouragement. Unfortunately, I have encountered this far too many times in my experience working in after school, that we end up with students who come, they get sent from their group lead to come see me as the site lead, and I'm asking them, what's going on? Why are we doing this? Hey, we've talked about this several times. How come we keep making the same choices? We've talked to your parents about it too. They know that you're doing this. They don't want you doing this. Why do we keep doing it? And ultimately what it comes back to for them, and some of them have said it in these words, is that I'm just bad. I'm just stupid. I'm just no good. Others don't say it outright in those words, but that's still the meaning that they are conveying with whatever their reasons are. Unfortunately, sometimes children come to us, and by the time we get them, they have been told over and over and over again by other people in their environment that they are hopeless or helpless, that they cannot do or be any better. And that's why they misbehave. And again, it's our job to try and figure out these reasons why in order to know how to appropriately respond to them. While these are the 8 underlying reasons for why children misbehave, there is another point that we need to address, and it's an idea of mistaken goals. And can misbehavior be caused by mistaken goals? So what are mistaken goals? Mistaken goals are basically a flaw in the child's way of thinking. It's mistaken or faulty logic that causes the child to misbehave when they're trying to get their emotional needs met. Misbehavior can be seen when children try to get attention from others, gain a sense of control, get revenge for their own perceived hurts, and or to remove themselves from frightening or painful situations. Some of the underlying causes for misbehavior can be seen mixed in here within these ideas of mistaken goals. Children can misbehave because they're trying to gain attention from others. Again, they can do this intentionally or unintentionally. It is more likely to be a mistaken goal when they do it on purpose, that their goal is, I want to get so-and-so's attention, so I'm going to drop my books, or I'm going to push this kid because they're going to talk to me, or I'm going to make a silly joke so everyone laughs and the teacher is going to think I'm funny and my peers are going to think I'm funny. But instead it's causing a problem in the classroom. It's misbehavior. But their logic, their reasoning for doing it was for a pure intent of getting their needs met, of attention from others. But unfortunately, it was a mistaken logic, a faulty logic. Children also have mistaken goals and therefore misbehave in regards to gaining self-control. Some children don't have any control in any aspects of their life. Their parents make their schedule, their parents determine what they're eating, what time they get up, what time they go to bed, what extracurricular, oh my gosh, I can't say that word. No, we're gonna give up. What outside activities that they can engage in. And therefore they feel that they have no control. And in the school setting, we can do the same thing, that they have a structured time of when they have recess, when they have lunch, what time they're doing math, what time they're doing reading. And we continue that schedule into the after school time. Schedules and structures are super important. However, we also need to have some student choice time within our schedules and our routines and our structures for the child to feel some sense of control. This is also where classroom jobs come in, and it can help with these mistaken goals. As we mentioned, sometimes children are just really angry and therefore they behave rebelliously. This can often be a mistaken goal because their way of thinking is, well, they hurt me, I'm gonna hurt them back. That way they're gonna understand. But their mistaken logic is that quite often that doesn't truly make the other child understand. Instead, it's just perpetuating that cycle of hurt, and therefore both parties end up getting in trouble more than likely. Also, children can misbehave because they're trying to remove themselves from a frightening or painful situation. The best example I can give of this is a bully victim, where a child who was originally a victim of a bully decides to respond by becoming a bully themselves. And the main reason that they do that is because they are afraid of the bully, or they are in pain from the bully, and they are trying to get away from that. And the way to get away from that is to become it themselves. This mixes in with the idea above about getting revenge. So not only can misbehavior come from those 8 main reasons from the previous slide, but it can also come from this idea of mistaken goals of a child trying to get their emotional needs met. It's also important to point out, even though we're not going to go into detail about this, but irritability and discomfort are part of the underlying causes of misbehavior. And therefore, if a child has a known disability or a known health condition that can cause discomfort, that child is more likely to be irritable and in pain, and therefore more likely to misbehave. So we need to again make sure when a child is misbehaving, we first address, is it truly a child-centered misbehavior, or is it an adult-centered misbehavior? If it is a child-centered misbehavior, why do we think it's happening? Which of those 8 underlying reasons is the cause? Or is it a mistaken goal? And furthermore, does the child have some physical condition, physical ability difference that might be causing some additional irritability or discomfort that can result in their behavior being different? We have to take all of this into consideration when determining if a child's behavior is truly intentionally or unintentionally, quote unquote, naughty, dysfunctional, or misbehavior. Once we know this, we can then move forward with how to promote functional or positive behaviors. Thank you for watching this video, Behavior Guidance Part 2.1. I look forward to sharing tips and tricks in our videos to come.